Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the fourth class in the Wax Down Wax Up series. If you watched all the episodes so far, I thank you. I hope you're learning a lot, and I'm sure all your hard work's gonna pay off. Today we're gonna get into piece values, specifically how much each piece is worth, and that's gonna help you decide when to make a trade and when not to. But as we'll also see, material values are not everything. The most important piece is the king, and checkmate ends the game. So getting into piece values, we're going to start with the queen. So as I said, the king is in some sense, it ends the game. But the other pieces, they have some numerical value that'll help you make choices in the game. So this was actually explained to me recently, and I found it very interesting. I don't actually remember when I learned it. I feel like someone just told me what the piece values were worth, and I just sort of memorized it, and I didn't actually think about how to. At least I don't remember the explanation, but I found it pretty useful. So the way you can sort of understand the derivation of it is a queen in the center of the board controls 27 squares, including the square it's on, and you can check that for yourself. And then a pawn. Suppose there's a white pawn here. It will control the two squares across from it, as well as the square in front of it. So that would be three squares, and the queen controls 27. But if you divide 27 by 3, you get 9. So that's where we get the sort of relative value of the queen is worth 9 pawns, and pawn is sort of the basic unit of 1, and all the other pieces you can probably get some similar derivations. So that's sort of just, I wanted to just introduce that so that you kind of have an understanding of where these numbers come from. It comes from the control of how many squares they can control, which makes sense. A piece, the more squares you can control, the more powerful it is. The queen controls the most from the center of the board. The next most powerful piece is the rook. The rook controls, the rook is worth, we say, 5 pawns. The bishop and the knight are a bit more controversial or debatable. So I think beginners are taught that a bishop and knight are each worth 3 pawns. But as you become more advanced, you learn that in a lot of positions, the bishop is actually a bit more, in most cases, the bishop is more powerful and useful. So, but for the time being, we can consider bishop and knight are about 3 pawns. Then you have the pawn, which is 1. So that's that. The next thing before I forget is, right, so we were going through all of these lead chess tools, and I wanted to try to do something different because I figured it could be boring for you to just watch me go through these tools. But if you have any questions, I always drop a question in the comments. And I just wanted to show you that I actually kept going. I finished, I think last time we finished the main one. I also did all of the intermediate as well as the advanced. So highly recommend you do those. And yeah, especially these castling and en passant rules, and then the piece value is what we just talked about. So it doesn't hurt you to do these. I'm trying to become a grandmaster, but I'm not above doing these, so I hope you take the time to do them. And yeah, so let's get right into the lesson. What I wanted to also talk about were some special rules. So we're gonna get, so that was sort of the talk about the piece value. Again, you should do this lead chess tool, piece value here, and the special rules I wanted to talk about were en passant. So as well as moving the pawn, so there's actually 3 rules that I wanted to talk about. The pawn being able to go up 2 squares, en passant, and castling. So the pawn can move 1 or 2 squares on the first move, but afterwards it can only go up 1 square. You can't go 2 squares after that. Or suppose I play pawn to e3, and I go g6, and then I go c4. This pawn also can't go 2 squares. It's only from the starting position where you can go up 2 squares. And that was apparently a rule that was introduced about maybe, I guess now 500 years ago. episode, I guess, be in sorry, not 500 years ago. Yeah, sorry, it would be 500 years ago. So it would be about 15 in the 16th century. So don't quote me on that. I just read that in last year's book. But yeah, so it wasn't always the case that one pawn can move two squares. That was introduced to make the game more lively, and definitely it makes chess a much more dynamic and interesting game when you can open up the lines and diagonals much faster, and then the pawns, there's more tension between the pawns, opposing pawns, earlier in the game. So it definitely makes the game more dynamic and exciting. So actually, I already have the pawns here. As we know, pawns can capture each square in front of it, but when you introduce a new rule, this pawn can actually go up two squares. So now, sort of this pawn kind of bypassed this pawn here, and there was some debate about what to do about this, and eventually they decided that for the move immediately after black plays the pawn forward two squares, a white pawn that's beside it has the option to capture it in passing, or en passant in French. So that would be an en passant move. You can see here that there's no special notation. It's as if the pawn was on e6. But one thing that we need to note is that you can only do that on the move right after. You can't wait another move, because now I'm not able to do en passant. It's only on the exact move right after. So that was so the move was introduced to make the game more lively, and then en passant was introduced to be fair to this d5 pawn, because d5 pawn wanted combat, it wanted some blood. By introducing en passant, it's able to capture if it wants to, or I guess if the commander wants to. Pawns, as we know, they're soldiers that often die a brave death in the pursuit of victory for the entire army. I talk in those terms. I was just reading about Lasker, and he said that chess is principally a fight. There's a lot of talk about is chess an art, is chess a game, is it a science? And no, the principal thing in chess is it's a fight. And it's not a fight like in boxing where it's physical. It's a fight where it's about who's the more like scientific, artistic, intellectual person, at least in the realm of chess. So those are the elements that matter. Of course, the physical aspect does matter, but it's not direct. It's sort of the physical aspect. If you're fit, you're able to think better. But what really matters is who's the more creative, the more logical person in chess. So yeah, just always keep that in mind, that the goal is to win. Sometimes you could get carried away and try to create a beautiful game, but if you lose, it doesn't hold much value in the chess world. The most important thing is that it's a fight, and you either win, or if you can't win, you at least don't lose and you make a draw. So a lot of rambling. So that was about d4, e4. Sorry, that was about en passant and pawns moving to squares. And the last thing I want to talk about was castling. So actually, this is an interesting. There's an interesting debate about what's better, e4 or d4, and I'm going to explain why that has to do with castling. So actually, I think Kramnik, he has this series on e4 that I was watching, and he sort of said that e4 could possibly be a better move. And of course, Bobby Fischer famously said e4 is best by test. But e4 is, Kramnik sort of said one reason why e4 could be best is because castling can be made much faster than if you castle queenside. So I haven't really explained what castling is. I suggest you go through the Lee Chess tool. But essentially, castling is when you make a move like this. So when you castle. So the king goes. You can castle either king side or you can castle queen side. The king going to the king side. It's sort of you simultaneously move the king and the rook, but it is a king move. So if you're ever playing a tournament, make sure you touch the king first, put the king to g1, and then with the same hand use the other rook. If you touch the rook first, then you're forced to move the rook, and the castling is not a rook move, it's a king move. So just wanted to mention that. But Kramnik's point was that when you play e4, you're able to castle in 4 moves. Whereas if you play d4, I'm just making a bunch of moves. Should be 7, queen d2, castle queenside. We see that it took 6 moves, so 6 versus 4. And often there's some people that say, and it makes sense, queenside castling is actually 2 moves. So you actually have to put your king on b1 so that it protects this weak pawn a2. So in some sense, if you consider castling queenside 2 moves because you also want to put your king on b1, then it's actually 7 versus 4. So that's why, and then since castling is one of the goals, strategic goals in chess, you want to get your king to safety and you want to get your pieces out. E4 is sort of a more dynamic move. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to say actually, that in a lot of games that beginners play, they often lose because they haven't castled on time. Even myself, I've fallen victim for that sometimes, even in recent years where I just didn't castle early enough. I don't think it happened after I became an international master, but for sure when I was the FIDE master, I remember a game in 2016 I was just looking at recently where I just didn't castle, so I got punished for that. So I would recommend everyone to play e4 and just try to get your king out. So I'm going to do a separate video on opening principles, but I wanted to finish this lesson with 2 very beautiful miniature games, and by miniature I mean like under 6 moves and less. These were in Lasker's book Common Sense in Chess, which is a quite a great book. I haven't read all of it, but just what I read so far is really nice. And this is sort of illustrating the concept of material value. So in both games, the winning side sacrifices the queen, which, as we said, is the strongest piece, but the point is they actually gave checkmate. So that's just one of the most important things, and something I'm trying to change about my own game is not putting too much value on material. It's like in life, I guess. You know, material is important, but if you make that the most important thing, you're going to neglect more important things. So, and in chess, the most important thing is king safety. I guess you can think of it as health. You know, the health of your king is more important than your material assets. So, health is wealth. Same thing in chess. So, always, you got to make sure the king is safe. And here we're going to see an example of where black thought that winning the queen was good, but in return they got checkmated. So bishop c4, e4, e5, knight f3, d6. It would have been better to develop the knight to c6, but d6 is a playable move. Now bishop c4. Now the point is, if knight f6, there could be knight g5, which is annoying, targeting this weak f7 pawn. So black plays f6, h6, but it's not advisable to play too many pawn moves. Like I said, the goal is to get your king out, so these 2 pieces should be moving. So maybe black could play bishop e7 first, with the idea of knight f6, so something like this. Now black can castle the king. And just to actually illustrate this material thing we talked about earlier, we see that white just exchanged a knight and a bishop for a rook and a pawn. So that's actually 3 and 3, which is 6. The rook is 5 and the pawn is 1, so that's 6 as well. However, it's been shown that 2 pieces are usually more valuable than a rook and a pawn. So in this case, black is actually standing better. And that's something you learn from experience. And of course, the context of the position matters. In this specific position, the knight and the bishop are indeed better than the rook and pawn, so this wouldn't be a good continuation for white. But black plays h6. Now white, again, continues developing the pieces. So here you may wonder, you know, white could have castled, which would have been a perfectly fine move. But white somehow sensed that there was a trap that black may fall into, and that's indeed what happened. And that's why this knight needs to be developed. So black plays bishop g4, thinking that if this knight moves anywhere, you can just take the queen. Amazingly enough, white moves the knight anyway, sacrificing the queen. If you take back then I just take the bishop and I just want a free pawn. So the critical move is to take the queen, and now black is actually just losing in 2 moves, checkmate in 2. So bishop takes f7 check, and now we see why the knight comes out. It delivers the final blow, checkmate on d5. So it's a very beautiful game. Just I think actually I probably fell for something like this when I first started. So hopefully now that you've seen it, you don't fall for something like this. And something else along the same lines. This time, okay, we can flip the board. So black actually gambits a pawn, which is nice actually. So white has won a pawn. Black knowingly does this to gain lines and diagonals for further pieces. White plays d3, bishop c5, so again developing the pieces. Note that white has no pieces out and the king is still in the middle, and they fall for this. They tried to restrict the mobility of the knight, and again this is that sort of fallacy in thinking that this knight can't move because the queen's behind it, but you are able to sacrifice the queen in a lot of variations. So black plays this move, knight takes d4, bishop takes d8, and now again checkmate in 2 moves. So that's a really nice checkmate, again without the queen. So it shows you that while material value is important, king safety is more important. So just a quick lesson for today. Just wanted to introduce some special rules. Wanted to start to get you thinking about the opening, about developing your pieces, and yeah, I think for the next class I'm going to have something more structured, and in the meantime I hope you go through these classes here. I think there's more checkmate patterns and basic tactics, which I'm going to count on the viewer to go through on their own time. And I've definitely gone through all of these in other versions before there was lead chess, but I'll probably go through this at some point too. And yeah, that's that. Thanks again for tuning in, and please do hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you have any questions and what you think so far. Thanks, and see you in the next video next week.